I remember the look in his eyes, not anger, but pure, clinical disappointment. He held the seven-figure contract in one hand and pointed at my community clinic badge with the other. "This," he sneered, "is charity work, and charity has no place on my level." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt the cold, clear realization that the man I married wasn't just cruel. He was strategically vulnerable. And in the game of ruthless ambition, he taught me, the person who moves in silence always wins. My name is Alara Vance. I'm 35, a nurse practitioner at the Phoenix Collective Clinic, or PC Clinic, where I specialize in community substance recovery. The penthouse air was so sterile it barely carried the scent of the expensive catering. Below us, Sterling Heights glittered, a carpet of jewels that felt a million miles away from the fluorescent lighting and bleach smell of my clinic. This was Julian's world. Tonight, we were celebrating his record-breaking acquisition deal, the one that netted him a bonus of $1.2 million. I'd spent an hour choosing my dress. It was modest, elegant, silk, but in this room, it felt like homespun wool. Julian Thorne, my husband, raised his crystal flute. The champagne inside probably cost more than my last paycheck. "To success," he said, his voice ringing with the polished confidence of a man who had never failed. The small, curated group of his colleagues murmured their approval. He toasted, drank, and then he turned to me. The smile didn't leave his face, but his eyes went flat. "My wife, Ilara," he said, gesturing to me. "She keeps me grounded. She just reminded me her salary is $62,000 a year." The laughter was polite, uncertain. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "It's nice, what she does," Julian continued, dismissing my entire career with a wave of his hand. "Very noble. But ultimately, it's irrelevant to our status." He stared right at me, his voice dropping slightly but losing none of its carrying power. "I'm going to be honest. Marrying you, Ilara, was a temporary compromise. It was a lowering of my standards, if we're being frank. A mistake I now regret, especially as I am approaching the apex of my career." Silence. The air crackled. This wasn't an argument. It was an execution. "So, from now on, I must insist you stop discussing your low-status work at social events. It's embarrassing." He took a step closer, lowering his voice for the final directives. "And I will dictate when we communicate or socialize. Stop chasing me for attention. It's unbecoming." I watched him deliver the lines. It was cold, precise. Every word had been chosen beforehand. This wasn't a drunken rant. It was a calculated verbal attack, designed to assert total dominance. He had practiced this. My hands didn't shake. The tears I expected didn't come. Instead, a metallic coldness settled in my stomach. It was the strangest feeling, not grief, but clarity. He thought he was closing a cage door, but he had just handed me the key. He had given me the perfect, undeniable opening to leave him entirely on my own terms. He looked at me, waiting for the hysterics, for the begging. I gave him nothing, slightly irritated by my lack of response. He gestured toward the hall. "Go to my office. I'll deal with you later." He dismissed me, like an employee, like a child. I turned without a word and walked away, leaving him to his celebration. I heard the door to his custom-built home office click shut down the hall. The sound had an awful finality to it. I was alone in the vast dining room, surrounded by expensive, untouched champagne and the ruins of a dinner I had arranged. I looked at the imported cheeses, the prosciutto, the miniature pastries. I went to the kitchen, found the Tupperware, and immediately began clearing the table. I scraped the brie into one container, the olives into another. I wasn't just cleaning up, I was packing away the leftovers of our failed celebration, of our entire marriage. I was discarding the remnants. I didn't sleep in our bed that night. I took my pillow and a single blanket and moved into the guest room down the hall. The mattress was firm, the air still. It was the first physical boundary I had ever drawn. I didn't slam the door. I closed it quietly. It was a silent, immediate acceptance of his terms. He demanded space. He would have it. The next morning, my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., just as it always did. I got up, went to the kitchen, and started the coffee maker. But I only made enough for one. I pulled out my favorite mug, the inexpensive ceramic one I had owned since college, the one Julian hated because it was off-brand. I poured my coffee, added my milk, and sat at the breakfast bar, scrolling through clinic emails. At 6:15, Julian emerged, dressed in his silk robe. He stalked into the kitchen, his eyes immediately going to the counter. He stopped. His pre-prepared health shake was not there. His ironed shirt, which I usually laid out with his briefing notes for the day, was not on the chair. His reserved silver tumbler, polished and waiting, was empty and cold. He looked at the small, half-empty coffee pot, then at my ceramic mug. His brow furrowed in visible confusion. This was not the routine. The shock was palpable, tightening his jaw. He expected me to be weeping, or apologizing, or waiting for him, desperate for forgiveness. He did not expect me to be sitting calmly, drinking coffee, and reading an article on my phone. He said nothing. He ripped open the refrigerator, stared blankly at the ingredients he didn't know how to assemble, and slammed it shut. He made a guttural noise of frustration and disappeared back into the bedroom. I finished my coffee. For the first time in years, the mental energy I usually spent anticipating Julian's needs, his mood, his schedule, his fragile ego was entirely my own. It felt like a massive, quiet engine humming to life inside me. I went to my laptop and paid the enrollment fee for a specialized certification course in addiction counseling. It was something I had put off for 2 years because Julian complained it would take up too much of my time. My next step was deconstruction. I logged into our shared household management account. I canceled the standing dry cleaning pickup. I canceled the specialized grocery order that kept the pantry stocked with his imported snacks and high alkaline water. I deleted his entire social calendar, which I had meticulously managed for our entire marriage. I let the intricate scaffolding that held up his meticulously structured life begin to dissolve. Chaos would creep in slowly, and he would be its only architect. That afternoon, I called Sasha. She's my closest friend, a high-powered architect who never understood what I saw in Julian. Ilara, is everything okay? You sound clear. I need to talk, I said. I met her and my sister, Mia, for a drink after my shift. I explained the situation with detached, factual calmness. I didn't cry. I simply relayed his words. Mia looked devastated for me, but Sasha's eyes went hard. Good, Sasha said, sliding her phone across the table. He finally showed you who he is. Now you show him who you are. The name on the screen was Valerie Hayes. She's a divorce attorney, Sasha explained. She doesn't just handle divorces. She dismantles the financial structures of arrogant, high-net-worth men. She's ruthless, and she's the best. I took the number. That night, I didn't study for my new course. I spent the evening meticulously tracking Julian's schedule. He was careless, leaving dropped papers in his home office, leaving his email open on the shared tablet. I wasn't monitoring him out of jealousy. I was gathering data. I was identifying his critical meetings, his travel plans, his moments of high stress. I was looking for the optimal time and place for maximum future disruption. On the 4th day, my phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Just checking in. Hope you're reflecting on things. It was brief, patronizing. The check-in of a superior, not a husband. I looked at the message, feeling that same metallic coldness. He had demanded I stop chasing him. He had dictated that he would decide when we communicated. He had initiated contact, but I hadn't confirmed his right to do so. I put the phone down, screen side down. I ignored the text. I was adhering strictly to his rules. I was giving him perfect compliance. Valerie Hayes' office was not opulent like Julian's. It was formidable. It was old wood, leather-bound books, and a view of the courthouse, not the skyline. It smelled like old money and litigation. I sat opposite her, my hands folded on her heavy mahogany desk. I had not come with tears. I had come with data. I slid a thin binder across the polished wood. "This is what I have," I said. Inside were my bank statements from 6 years ago, showing the deposits from my double shifts at the hospital before I landed the NP job. I had the canceled checks for our rent, paid entirely from my account while Julian studied for the bar exam. I had the credit card statements showing the suits I bought him for his first round of interviews. I had supported us, completely, for 28 months while he transitioned from law school to investment banking. Valerie, a woman with steel gray hair pulled into an impossibly tight bun and eyes that missed nothing, reviewed the documents with terrifying speed. She did not coo. She did not offer sympathy. She just nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "He's an idiot," she stated, not as an insult, but as a legal assessment. "He thinks his new bonus is his. He's forgotten that in this state, the second he married you, his earning potential became a shared asset." She tapped the stack of my old pay stubs. "Your prior sacrifices, Ilara, and this current salary disparity, combined with his impending high-status income. Mr. Thorne is highly vulnerable. He just handed you the hammer." "He called my work charity," I said, the words tasting like ash. "We'll make sure his charity costs him 7 figures," Valerie replied flatly. I left her office feeling cold, but focused. That night, I bought a simple, hardbound notebook from a drugstore. I began the journal. This was not a diary of my feelings. It was a log of facts. October 14th, Julian arrived home at 2 a.m., unexplained. Dismissed my query about dinner. October 16th, referred to my clinic colleagues as well-meaning simpletons during a client dinner. October 17th, demanded silence and total control of our communication. The night of the party, I documented every dismissive comment, every unexplained late night, every instance of status-based contempt. I was establishing a clear, undeniable pattern of emotional abuse and financial imbalance. Valerie's first instruction was precise. "Assume he is already hiding money. He thinks you're the simple, charitable wife who doesn't understand finance. Use that." She was right. While searching for his old tax returns, which I had always been responsible for filing, I found a digital folder I was not supposed to. It was saved on the home server, mislabeled contingency. Inside were statements for a complex offshore account, opened 4 months prior. He had been subtly shifting funds, just a small percentage at a time, believing I would never notice. This was not just greed. This was premeditation. He intended to use this against me. My hands were shaking, but not with fear. It was adrenaline. I called Valerie. "Good," she said, completely unfazed. "We needed that. Now, secure yourself. Immediately." The next day, on my lunch break, I went to a small regional credit union 6 blocks from the PC clinic. It was the kind of place Julian would never enter. I opened a new checking and savings account using only my name and my clinic address. I filled out the direct deposit form to reroute a portion of my paycheck. I was building my exit fund. My work at the clinic meant I had a network built on trust and community, not capital. I used it. I called a social worker I knew and explained I needed a private, furnished sublet, off-market, for a client in a volatile domestic situation. By the end of the day, I had secured a small, private, furnished apartment downtown. I signed a short-term lease. It was clean, anonymous, and there was zero trace leading back to the penthouse. Sasha called me 2 days later, her voice buzzing with suppressed laughter. "Intel report," she said. "I just saw Julian in the lobby of my building. Ilara." His shirt looked like he'd slept in it, and he spent a full 5 minutes yelling at the valet because he lost his car keys. "He is coming apart at the seams." My silent strategy was working. The final piece was the work itself. I needed to understand the machine I was fighting. Julian was arrogant, often leaving his investment firm contracts and communications in his unlocked home office. I photographed them. I wasn't just looking for numbers. I was looking for the moral cost of his job. I found the emails detailing strategies for exploiting legal tax loopholes. I found memos on acquisitions that would dissolve the pension funds of hundreds of workers. I was reading the architecture of his cruelty. The ethical vacuum required for his high-status job was the same ethical vacuum he applied to our marriage. He did not just dismiss my values. He was professionally rewarded for having none. I uploaded every copy to the secure drive Valerie had provided. The case was built. I heard the sound of something heavy hitting the marble floor in the foyer, a briefcase. It was 5:45 a.m. His crucial client meeting in Chicago was scheduled for 9 a.m., which meant his flight was at 7. He should have been in the car almost an hour ago. For our entire marriage, I was his executive assistant as much as his wife. I always set 3 alarms for his critical travel days and provided a physical wake-up call, usually with his silver tumbler of coffee already prepared. Last night, I had simply gone to sleep in the guest room. I heard him roaring my name. Ilara, Ilara, where the hell are you? I stayed in bed, listening to the escalating panic. I heard him frantically calling an airline, then screaming at a car service. He had missed the flight. Later, I saw the inevitable expense report he filed, routed automatically to the shared email I still monitored a last-minute private jet charter. $22,000. Just to compensate for the fact that I was no longer his alarm clock. He was gone by the time I emerged. The kitchen was the physical evidence of his collapse. The stainless steel trash bin, usually emptied daily by the service I had canceled, was overflowing. It was a visual testament to his rapidly deteriorating health. Expensive takeout containers from restaurants that cost $400 a meal were piled next to greasy pizza boxes. But it was the cans that caught my eye. A shocking number of empty energy drinks, silver and blue and black, formed a small aluminum mountain on the counter. He was fueling his high-powered life with caffeine, sugar, and sodium. The entire penthouse smelled sour, like spoiled food and artificial sweeteners. Julian's mother, Catherine, called my cell phone that afternoon. Her voice was laced with that familiar, veiled concern that was actually a command. Ilara, darling, I just spoke to Julian. He sounds terribly stressed. He missed a very important meeting. She paused, waiting for me to jump in and explain how I would soothe him, how I would fix it. Is everything all right, dear? He needs you to intervene. Hello, Catherine, I said, keeping my voice level, polite. The voice of the helpful nurse practitioner. I appreciate you calling. Julian has requested some space and distance recently, so I'm simply honoring that. I'm sure he'll manage. Her intake of breath was sharp. Honoring it, Ilara. This is his career. He needs his support system. Yes, I agree, I said. But he explicitly asked for this boundary. You'll have to speak with him about it. I disconnected before she could argue. He was forced to fly to Chicago for the rescheduled client trip. The afternoon his flight took off. I executed the next phase. I packed 3 large suitcases. Not the designer bags he'd bought me, those were marital assets. And Valerie said to leave them. I packed my professional books, my certification materials, my modest clinic wardrobe, and the few personal items that actually meant something to me. I loaded them into my car and drove to the secured apartment downtown. When I returned to the penthouse, I walked through the primary bedroom. I left no trace of my departure. His side of the closet was untouched. My side looked perhaps slightly sparse, but not empty. He wouldn't notice. He returned that evening, smelling of stale plein air and defeat. I was in the guest room, my laptop open, designing a presentation for a major regional grant application for the PC clinic. My mind was focused on data, on community outcomes, on creating tangible value. I heard him pacing in the hall. Then, a knock. Not a polite tap, but a heavy, insistent knock. Ilara. His voice was muffled, strained. He sounded exhausted. Open the door. We need to talk things out. This is ridiculous. He was attempting to force intimacy, to reset the narrative. desperate for the routine anchor of the wife who fixed things. I did not open the door. I stayed seated at the desk. "Julian," I called out, my voice clear and calm. "What are you doing? Let me in." "I am respecting the boundary you set regarding communication," I stated, the words perfectly articulated. "You said you would dictate when we communicate. I am unavailable until he decides we are allowed to speak." The silence on the other side of the door was heavy. I heard him take a step back. Then he slammed his fist against the wall next to the doorframe. "That is not what I meant, and you know it. Open this damn door." I said nothing. He was furious. He was completely bewildered by my cold adherence to his own rules. He roared my name again, but I did not answer. Finally, I heard him stomp down the hall and slam his office door. The soundproofing was good, but not perfect. I heard his frustrated, muffled pacing. I heard his voice, sharp and agitated, on the phone. He was making calls, professional contacts, trying to undo the damage of the morning. I heard him yelling at someone about logistics and instability. He was pacing and shouting until at least 3 a.m. I turned back to my laptop. I tuned out the sound of his self-destruction and focused on my grant proposal. I was designing a future. He was imploding in the prison he had built for me, a prison whose bars I was now using as weapons. Julian's firm operated on a level of scrutiny I found suffocating. It wasn't just about the deals you closed, it was about the pristine image you projected. A week after the private jet incident, I intercepted an internal memo he'd left. Discarded. On the kitchen counter, he was getting sloppy. His firm was announcing a critical personal stability review for all candidates seeking executive promotion. I scanned the corporate jargon, but the message was clear. They were focusing specifically on marital and domestic life harmony. They wanted stable spouses, quiet homes, and predictable lives. A messy, separated, or warring household was a liability, a sign of poor judgment. This was a massive existential threat to Julian's ambition. Suddenly, his strategy shifted. The silent treatment, which I had simply been complying with, was apparently over. He started leaving vague, performative notes on the joint whiteboard calendar in the kitchen. "Need to connect. Talk tonight, big week. Let's clear the air." These were not apologies. They were artifacts. They were attempts to project normalcy, written in his aggressive block print, clearly intended for any potential staff or colleagues who might, by some remote chance, ever see it. He was building a paper trail of a man trying to connect with his stubborn, distant wife. Sasha's firm shared the 34th floor of Julian's building. Her text came during my lunch break. "Intel drop. Just saw Thorne by the elevators. He looks like hell. His suit is rumpled and he was taking an agitated call outside. He keeps running his hands through his hair. Whatever you're doing. Alara, it's working. He's bleeding control." I felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. The architect of the pristine life was appearing disheveled in the very arena he worshipped. The real pivot came 3 days later, a panicked text from Julian's sister, Olivia. "Alara. What is going on? Julian called Mom and Dad. He's been telling them for months that you've been struggling, that you're simple and unhappy and holding him back from his potential. He's spinning this whole story that you're having some kind of breakdown. I don't know what to believe, but he sounds desperate." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. For months. This wasn't a recent development. This wasn't a reaction to my withdrawal. He had been quietly bad-mouthing me, poisoning the well with his entire family, methodically preparing a narrative that I was the simple, unstable spouse holding him back. The metallic coldness in my stomach solidified into steel. I finally understood. He wasn't seeking reconciliation. He didn't miss me. He was seeking a prop. He needed his stable, simple, charity case wife to stand beside him, smiling obediently, until he passed the stability review. His contempt wasn't just a reactionary cruelty unleashed in a moment of arrogance. It was a calculated, long-term strategy. I now understood exactly what I had to do. Julian had built his career on exploiting loopholes and managing risk. He had just exposed his single greatest vulnerability. I spent that evening drafting a new document. It was not emotional. It was a detailed, non-libelous timeline. It listed the date of my financial support during his bar exam preparation. It listed the dates of his major bonuses alongside his documented dismissals of my career. It detailed the financial imbalance of our household contributions. It detailed his demands for silence and his abandonment of communication. I excluded the offshore account that was Valerie's ace in the hole. I sent the document anonymously, from a secure email address, to the independent, prestigious internal ethics advisory group at Julian's firm. The memo he had carelessly left behind had listed their contact information. It was an integrity hotline. I was simply an anonymous party providing context on a partner track candidate's stability. My final step was a visit to the post office. I finalized the documentation Valerie needed for the divorce filing. The key document was the official government-issued proof of my change of primary residence registration, backdated to the day I signed the lease on the downtown apartment. I was no longer a resident of his penthouse. I was a ghost in his house, and the haunting was about to begin. Julian slammed the door of the penthouse, hard enough to rattle the glass of the tall windows. He was furious. He had just missed a major work deadline, an unforgivable offense in his world, directly traceable to his personal distraction, the rotting chaos of the life I had quietly withdrawn from. He found me in the living room, standing over two last, small boxes. They held my professional texts, the heavy, academic books on pharmacology and mental health. I was taping the lids shut, calmly and methodically. He stopped 10 feet away. He had clearly rehearsed this. He didn't yell. He adopted his client voice, smooth and regretful. "Elara," he began, his shoulders slumped in a performance of weary contrition. "Look, I'm stressed. I've been under immense pressure. I admit I temporarily lost perspective the other week. I want to apologize for my tone." He delivered the lawyerly apology perfectly, admitting only to a tone problem and completely avoiding accountability for the calculated cruelty of his words and actions. He was trying to minimize the offense, not own the damage. I didn't stop taping the box. I just pressed the seal down and cut the tape with a sharp snap. I looked up, not with tears, but with detached clarity. "I simply complied with your instructions for silence and distance," I stated, my voice calm, factual. "You are experiencing the consequences of your chosen boundaries." His client persona fractured instantly. His eyes narrowed. "That's ridiculous." I said that in the heat of the moment. It was a calculated, precise instruction. "Julian, you dictated the terms of our communication. I followed them perfectly." I stepped away from the boxes, creating space between us. He tried to shift tactics, moving toward the side table where my personal cell phone usually rested. He wanted to regain control, to see who I had been talking to while he was shut out. "Let me see your phone," he demanded, his hand outstretched. "Who have you been communicating with?" I took a step back. "You won't find it. I changed carriers 2 weeks ago, and I secured a separate digital life. You have no access to it." The look on his face was confusion mixed with dawning alarm. He had assumed my digital life was as transparent and contained as my domestic life. I reached into my blazer pocket. I pulled out a crisp, official piece of paper, the change of address notification from the city registrar. "I have already established my own peaceful, autonomous residence," I said, showing him the document. "I have not been staying here for the last 10 days. I've been living downtown." His composure shattered. The smooth veneer cracked, revealing pure, primitive fear. "You can't leave without discussion," he shouted, throwing his arms up. "What about our assets? What about my professional image? You can't just destabilize my entire life right now." Discussion was unnecessary. I replied, folding the document precisely. "You unilaterally defined our communication terms 2 weeks ago, and I have one final compliance instruction for you." I met his frantic gaze. "My attorney, Valerie Hayes, We'll handle all future discourse. The name landed like a bomb. Julian froze. He didn't just recognize the name, he knew the reputation. Valerie Hayes was the last person he wanted handling his divorce, especially with a partnership review pending. Valerie Hayes, he repeated, the color draining from his face. Are you insane? You can't afford her. I will bleed you dry. I will threaten bankruptcy. I will file countersuits. I will litigate this thing for 5 years just to exhaust your pathetic savings. He had played his final desperate card, financial intimidation. I looked at him, feeling nothing but cold pity. You told me you were going to control our communication, I said quietly. You dictated distance, and I am simply respecting your boundaries, completely and perfectly. Valerie will be in touch tomorrow. I left him standing there, frozen by the name of his own worst legal nightmare, beside the boxes that contained the only parts of me he hadn't yet tried to own. Monday morning felt different. The air in my small downtown apartment felt lighter, the silence meaningful. Valerie Hayes had assured me she was executing Phase 7 precisely at 10 o'clock a.m. I was at the PC clinic, deeply focused on a complex patient intake, reviewing the chart of a young man struggling with relapse. I needed to be grounded, present, and professional. I needed to be the Alara Vance Julian deemed irrelevant. The work anchored me. Meanwhile, a mile away, in the glass tower that was Julian's cathedral, the clock struck 0. I received a text from Valerie 20 minutes later. Done. Delivered. The process server, a professional I never saw but who earned my respect that day, had delivered the divorce papers to Julian at the most visible, high-stakes moment imaginable. Not at his home, where he could hide them, but right outside the executive boardroom, during a mandatory strategy meeting with the managing partners present. His entire professional ecosystem witnessed the delivery of the humiliating manila envelope. The papers were meticulous. They didn't just cite irreconcilable differences, they explicitly detailed disparate life goals and calculated emotional abandonment, backed by the timeline I had created. Included were detailed financial summaries outlining my early support and his current disparity, proving he was not the sole financial architect of his success. My old cell phone number, which Julian had memorized, instantly began receiving calls. The screen on my new secure phone showed Julian's name, then unknown number, then Julian's name again. I let them all ring. When he finally realized the old number was disconnected, he shifted to email, flooding my work address with frantic messages. This is sabotage. You'll regret this. Call me now. I opened them, scanned the first few words, and promptly archived them without reply. Valerie's advice was absolute: maintain the silence he demanded. My work email was for patient care and grant applications, not his personal emergency. The sabotage attempt went public within the hour. Julian, in a desperate attempt to salvage his public image, suddenly transformed his social media profile. He posted loving, retrospective pictures of us photos from 2 years ago, moments before the toxicity set in. He framed himself as the heartbroken victim of a sudden, inexplicable departure, the innocent party blindsided by a wife who had lost her way. But Julian had forgotten about the community I had built. My sister, Mia, called me laughing, a beautiful, vindicated laugh. I saw his post. It's ridiculous. Don't comment, I advised. Just use the language he gave us. Within hours, Mia and Sasha were working in sync, not posting a rebuttal, but talking quietly. They made sure the exact quote Julian used, "I can't believe I ever lowered myself enough to marry you," made its way around their professional circles, a discreet but potent counter-narrative. He was not the victim of a sudden breakdown. He was the perpetrator of documented cruelty. The internal fallout was swift. The ethics group, which had received my anonymous timeline, finalized its report regarding his personal stability and financial discrepancies. It caused a ripple of concern right up to the top. I learned later that the firm's lead counsel issued Julian a serious, private internal warning. His instability was now a firm liability. Later that week, Julian found me. He parked his expensive SUV illegally outside the PC clinic entrance. I was leaving my shift. He was wearing a suit that was immaculate, a desperate attempt to regain control through appearance. He was holding an enormous, ostentatious gift bag. Designer logos shone against the white paper. I knew it was a purse, something obscenely expensive. He hoped to buy back my silence. He blocked my path. "Ilara, we need to talk. I bought you this. Look." I stopped 6 feet from him. I looked him in the eye, utterly devoid of emotion. "I am not taking your gift," I said. "And all communication must go through Valerie Hayes." He tried to thrust the bag toward me. "Take it. This is not about the divorce. This is me showing you I know your worth." "My worth," I replied, moving smoothly around him toward the street, "is not measured in currency. Julian, it is measured in value. Your attempt to purchase my silence is noted, but refused." I left him standing there, holding the expensive bag, surrounded by the reality of my work and my success in the world he scorned. He could not enter this place, and he could not bribe the woman I had become. Julian knew the game had changed. His next move was a paper one, designed entirely for an audience of three-piece suits. He submitted a formal, documented attempt at reconciliation through his own corporate counsel. It was a maneuver engineered to look impressive to his firm's review board. "See, I am trying to save my marriage. I am stable." Valerie Hayes, however, was not impressed. She called me the moment the document landed on her desk. "He's running out of time, Ilara," she noted. Her voice clipped. "We will systematically demolish this offer." The fact that his desperate attempt to save his marriage coincides precisely with his stability review. Deadline will not go unnoticed in court, or in his boardroom. Julian pressed for a direct conversation. Valerie advised against it, but I saw the opportunity. I agreed to one private, monitored video call. My only condition, which I relayed through Valerie's office, was that the conversation would be recorded for legal transparency. Julian reluctantly agreed. He needed the optics more than he feared the risk. I set up my laptop in my quiet downtown apartment. When Julian's face appeared on the screen, he looked utterly wrecked. His eyes were shadowed, his hair disheveled, the high-status mask had slipped entirely. He launched into his routine. He pleaded, his voice cracking with artificial tears. He claimed he was in therapy, that he had already changed, that he missed me. But the heart of his plea was not emotional. It was professional. "My firm is looking at this, Ilara," he choked out. "My partnership. Your absence is destroying my focus. I can't think. I can't work. We can fix this, but you have to come home." He was emphasizing exactly how much my absence was hurting his professional focus. My well-being was secondary to his quarterly earnings. I cut him off. "I understand this is affecting your career, Julian, but let's focus on one thing: value." He blinked, confused by the shift in language. "Value? What are you talking about?" I looked directly into the camera. "I spend my days at the PC clinic, building value. I save lives. I foster community trust. I help people detox and rebuild their foundation, brick by painful brick. What is the value you create?" "Julian." He sputtered. "I manage markets. I generate capital. I maximize corporate profit. Regardless of the social cost." I finished for him. "Your value is manipulating loopholes. My value is building up people." Then I leaned in, my voice dropping to a cool whisper. This was the moment of unpredictability. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice the offshore account you created 4 months ago? Julian? The one labeled contingency?" He froze. His face went white. He opened his mouth to deny it, but no sound came out. The shock was complete. I had seen his financial moves, the small, complex shifts he thought were invisible, long before he believed I was paying attention. "You were observing me," he whispered, a horrified realization. "You taught me how." I answered simply. "I delivered the final blow. using his own arrogant words. "You told me I would never be on your level. Julian, you were absolutely right. My level builds up communities. Yours only builds up your bank account." He lunged forward, trying to cut the connection, but it was too late. The recording of the conversation was live, time-stamped, and secured on Valerie's server. It included his panicked confirmation of his professional vulnerabilities, his admission that his firm was watching, and the clear evidence that his entire reconciliation effort was a facade to save his partnership review. He had walked directly into the trap he had designed for me. The recording was devastating evidence, and the legal transparency he reluctantly agreed to was now his greatest liability. Backed into a corner by the recorded video call, Julian's final instinct was to lash out with pure aggression. He authorized his attorney to file an aggressive countersuit. The document was a masterpiece of arrogance. He demanded spousal maintenance and claimed I had manipulated him during a vulnerable time, leveraging his own professional stress against him. It was a desperate, final act of intimidation designed to exhaust my meager resources through legal warfare. Valerie Hayes called me immediately. I was prepared for her to sound concerned. Instead, I heard a genuine, low chuckle on the line. "He just handed us the entire firm, Ilara," she said, sounding delighted. "He thinks he's intimidating you. He's actually given us the leverage needed to subpoena his firm's internal communications regarding his partnership review." His countersuit, by making claims of manipulation linked to his professional anxiety, made his partnership track status directly relevant to the litigation. He had inadvertently opened the door to the one place he guarded most fiercely, his corporate vault. I drove over to Valerie's office that afternoon to provide the final piece of documentation. It was the notarized timeline I had spent weeks refining. It meticulously linked Julian's documented instances of cruelty, his dismissal of my salary, his demand for distance directly to the dates of major decisions regarding my financial sacrifices for his career. It showed that my giving was strategic, and his taking was contemptuous. The subpoena was issued the next morning, targeted directly at the firm's executive team. The response from his firm was instant and devastating. The Ethics Committee, which had received my anonymous timeline, finalized its report regarding his personal stability and financial discrepancies. It was now faced with an official legal inquiry into the private life of a partner track candidate. They didn't even wait for the legal discovery. Julian received a quiet but devastating phone call. His promotion review was deferred indefinitely until his personal liabilities were resolved. He was no longer a candidate, he was a problem. The prize he had sacrificed our marriage for was yanked from his grasp. I didn't hear from his attorney for 2 days. Then, my secure burner phone, which I used only for my sister and Sasha, rang. The incoming number was completely untraceable. Julian, desperate and realizing he could not fight without destroying his career, was using his own burner phone. He had exhausted his official channels. I answered. His voice was barely a controlled hiss. All the smooth arrogance was gone, replaced by raw fear and resentment. "It has to end," he admitted. "My firm is concerned. They put the partnership on hold. You need to call Valerie Hayes and stop this right now." I listened to him admit his professional vulnerability. I listened to him implicitly confirm that my strategic withdrawal had caused a financial crisis in his life, proving my leverage was real. "All communication must go through Valerie Hayes," I responded, my voice calm, flat. I didn't acknowledge his existence as a person, only as a party in a legal proceeding. "Consider this my complete and perfect compliance with your original request for distance." I didn't wait for his reply or his inevitable shout. I pressed the end call button. I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the small black phone. The real victory wasn't the 7 figures I knew I would win. It was the fact that I had forced Julian Thorne to acknowledge my strategic power on his terms, in his most sacred arena, his career. He tried to buy my silence. I took his future. The gala was in the grand ballroom of the Sterling Heights Metropolitan Club. It was a prestigious, high-profile charity event. Exactly the kind of place Julian had to attend to maintain his crumbling professional appearances. I was there, too, but not as his plus one. I was attending as a newly recognized leader in community health, thanks to the regional grant I had secured for the PC clinic. I wore a simple, tailored navy dress. Not expensive, but it fit perfectly. Across the room, Julian caught my eye. He was already talking to one of the managing partners, his smile strained, his energy frantic. He saw me, and his eyes widened. He saw Ilara Vance, but not the wife he remembered. I was radiant, not because of the lighting or the dress, but because of the confidence of complete self-ownership. I was unburdened. He abandoned his conversation and made a beeline for me during a brief moment of quiet near the silent auction tables. It was a final, desperate public maneuver. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice laced with false intimacy. He reached out, attempting to take my arm, feigning concern and partnership in front of key clients who were standing nearby. I pulled back instantly, physically recoiling. I looked at him with detached clarity, the way a doctor looks at a complicated failing system. I did not raise my voice. I didn't need to. My words carried the weight of final judgment. "Julian," I began, my voice clear enough for those nearby to hear. "You spent 3 years defining a person's worth by their salary. You dismissed me because my income was $62,000, not $1.2 million. He tried to interrupt. "That's unfair." I was stressed. "Today," I continued, cutting through his lie, "I signed the settlement based on the value I created. The support I gave you when you had nothing. The 2 years of rent and meals I paid for while you studied for the bar. The final revelation was not just for him. It was for his audience. And speaking of value," I continued, my gaze steady, "I know your firm's internal concerns. I know your partnership review has been deferred indefinitely. They are waiting for your personal liabilities to be resolved. It's a shame that your professional failure is linked directly to your personal contempt." Julian staggered back half a step. His entire narrative of victimhood and professional infallibility was crumbling right in front of the people who mattered most. He was publicly exposed. I delivered the final, definitive blow, using his own vocabulary, his own concept of class. "You told me I could never afford class. You were wrong. Class isn't about the money you acquire. It is about the value you create, the impact you leave behind. My world, Julian, is built on helping others stand up. You can't enter it, because you wouldn't survive the honesty." I turned, leaving him standing there, exposed and alone beneath the glittering chandeliers. I walked straight to Sasha and Mia, joining my friends and my colleagues from the PC clinic. The true revenge was my irreversible peace and success in the world he deemed beneath him. He was left watching his future prospects dissipate in the gaze of his peers, trapped by the ambition he let define him. Thank you for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are tuning in from so we can share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to make sure this story is heard by more people.